ho, ho! Merry Christmas, and welcome to this extra special festive edition of Caged In Presents Coppola Connections. As always, brought to you by the Breadcrumbs Collective and hosted by me, Petros Patsilivus. And our festive treat under the tree this week is the 2019 Netflix animation Klaus. But if you're new to this podcast and don't know what we do here, we watch every single film in the collective Coppola filmography to determine, are they the greatest film family of all time? This week I'm joined by Russell Bailey of the amazing Not Just for Kids podcast, but more on that in a few moments. Obviously, we will be rifling through all the presents in this. We'll be checking the naughty and the nice list in regards to spoilers. So if you haven't seen this film, head on over to Netflix to watch it now. So I guess all that's left to do on your father's behest is to head to a tiny small town that is riddled with a gangland war that has raged on for centuries. Befriend an old man who lives in the mountains who makes these beautiful, lovely little wooden toys, and persuade him to join in your plan as you try and deliver 6,000 letters in 1 year. And in the process, create the legend that is Santa Claus as we make some Coppola connections. As the festive season is upon us, it's time to head to Smearensburg to try not to get caught in a war of two feuding families whilst befriending a lone woodsman from the mountains as we talk 2019's Klaus, directed by Sergio Pablos and Carlos Martinez Lopez, written by Sergio Pablos, Jim Mahoney and Zach Lewis, and features a stellar voice cast including J.K. Simmons, Rashida Jones, Will Sasso, Joan Cusack, the late great Norm Macdonald, and today's Christmassy Coppola connection, Jason Schwartzman. The postman sent on this assignment to see if this film delivers is the host of the always enjoyable Not Just for Kids podcast, Russell Bailey. Merry Christmas, Russ. Come join me by the fire. It's a pleasure to have you here. How are you?
I'm all right, and Merry Christmas to you too. I'm very excited to be on to talk about this particular film. But yeah, it's lovely to be here to chat about this film around Christmas because we're so close to Christmas. I'm getting excited.
Yeah. So yeah, I probably left this a bit late. I've been listening to your podcast recently, and I think you said like it's a month before Christmas, and you're recording an episode, and I was like, it really made me think, oh man, I need to get better at scheduling things instead of being like a week, 2 weeks out from when the episodes go out. But before we get to talking about the Coppola family in this film, tell us a little bit about Not Just for Kids. What's it about? What do you do over there on that podcast?
So Not Just for Kids is, and I've tweaked it slightly in how I describe it now. So it's about family films and the films you grew up with. So it basically means that I can talk about animation, like today's film, and like classic family films like Free Willy or Babe. Those are two of those we've discussed recently. And I can also cheekily talk about things like Terminator 2 and South Park, the movie, and Austin Powers, which are not family films, but also films that I watched when I was very young and shaped me. So yeah, so it's just basically during the first lockdown, I found myself going crazy because I was furloughed and at home with my kids and nowhere to go. And I'd had this idea the October before to do a podcast about family films because I'm a father of two, and I'm a father of two, and when you're a father, you watch a lot of family films. You watch a lot of these, both films you loved and films that are new. And so I did this podcast. I did a series about this 10 years of animation between Toy Story and Home on the Range, because I kind of had this narrative of Western animation where it was the birth of 3D CGI animation leading to the death of traditional 2D animation at Disney, because it was like the success of Pixar and DreamWorks that kind of led to Disney stop making 2D animation, which I think is a great tragedy because many of the great films by Disney are 2D animation, but Home on the Range is not one of them, and several of those films of the era are not. And yeah, and I had really fun on my first series, and it became something that I kept doing. So like I've done Spielberg films because I looked at his career and he's got so many films he's directed and produced that are family films, and So like, Gremlins for this time, but also Jaws, Jurassic Park, the Indiana Jones films, Back to the Future. So many of these films are his, or he's like worked on them and is affiliated with them. Then I did Studio Ghibli, which you came on for. You came and did Pom Poko, which I wasn't going to cover because I didn't quite know how to fit in the giant testicled raccoon film, but I did, and it was great fun. And I've recently done 90s, so I did like 22, 23 episodes on the 90s. And
Amazing.
covered like the stars of the 90s and certain trends. So there was like a couple of episodes about animal films. So like a lot of films about talking animals were in the 90s because it was kind of like the birth of CGI meant that we could have talking animals. Apparently, it's one of our great developments of the 90s. And next up, so right now I'm doing Christmas films because I love Christmas. So
Me too, man.
I've covered some great Christmas films, and next up, after I do a little thing in January, we're going to do musicals. I'm going to dive into musicals. I'm going to wallow in some great films of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and go all the way up to The Greatest Showman, which I mean I'm not a fan of, but I've found someone who is. So
Yeah,
they're going to come on and talk to me about The Greatest Showman. Yeah, that's what I do.
It feels like a perfect time to be talking about musicals because it feels like sort of 2021. It's kind of been this like rebirth of the musical, right? In the
Yeah.
Heights, Tick Tick Boom, and West Side Story. It really is this kind of like, wow, like it feels like we've almost like gone back near on 100 years or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like history really does repeat itself. One of the things I wanted to ask you regarding like being a father and like watching like family films and stuff like that, do you give yourself over to like new stuff, or do you battle with that? Because I sometimes battle with that thing of not being like with anything I'm into. Like I know there's so, like books as well. I know there's so many books that I read as a kid, and it's like I often worry, like, oh, am I just trying to force feed my kid the things that like I enjoyed as a kid, or yeah? And how do you kind of embrace new films with your are you for that, or are you kind of finding a healthy balance between the two?
So yeah, I'll show my kids all the stuff that I loved. My daughter was watching Jurassic Park when she was 2 or 3 because it's my favorite film ever made, and I showed it to her. She loves Home Alone 1 and 2, which we've watched recently, like this week. Uh, yeah, so there are lots of films that I grew up with that I make her watch, like The Rescuers Down Under, which is one of my favorite Disney's,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. But when it comes to modern family films, not the live action stuff. Live action stuff still tends to be pretty ropey at times. Like I think the stuff I love in the 90s is because I grew up on it, not because I think they're great films. So like uh, I know Mrs. Doubtfire has a lot of fans, but I rewatched it and I was like, this film is just okay and hasn't aged as well as I'd like it to. But like animation in the last 10, 15 years or so has just been pretty phenomenal. And the film we're talking about today is very much a part of that, like this movement of stuff quite separate from Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks. These smaller studios, the likes of Netflix being able to fund
Mhm.
these animations. So like last year me and my daughter watched Wolf Walkers as part of the London Film Festival online, and
Amazing.
it was this wonderful moment to be sat next to her watching this cartoon saloon, and we watched other cartoon saloons because of it. Um, she watches Ghibli with me, and that's like some of their stuff's incredible. Not the last film they did. The last film they did was not was weak, but there are some great Ghiblis in there. Yeah, and there's this amazing animation that Netflix put out. Well, actually, there's two. So one is the Mitchells versus the Machines, which is a Sony animation, but Netflix brought it and distributed it, and
Yep.
it's my
It's
favorite film of the year. It's gorgeous. It mixes 3D and 2D animation. It's funny, and it's also kind of quite meaningful in some of the stuff it does with its characters. So that's a good one. And then there's this TV show called Maya and the Free, which is this I forget the name of the director, but he did The Book of Life a couple of years ago, which is another great animation.
yep.
But he it's this 9-part TV show that's basically this epic story that's telling about this princess going off to find these fellow warriors to go off and essentially kill a god because the god wants to kill her. And it's like big and epic, and there's death, and it's all this other stuff. And my daughter has watched it 6 or 7 times now. She like will start it, watch it, start it, watch it, and she's in this loop fairly often. She'll sometimes break out and watch Spirit, which is not great. It's not one of the great animations of the last 10 years. She loves the Spirit TV show. We went and watched the Spirit film that came out this year.
Yeah.
I love Jake Gyllenhaal, but it was a test.
Yeah.
But yeah, this TV show she loves. It's gorgeous. It plays with its format. It deals with death and life, and it doesn't have a super happy ending. It has an ending that's quite bittersweet.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot of stuff from my childhood, from when I was growing up, that I show her, but also I think we're quite lucky that a lot of the animation right now is exceptional. Like some Disney stuff's good. Pixar can bring out some great stuff, although Soul was a
It's not a kids
difficult one
film.
to explain.
It's
No,
not a
I
kids film.
because we
They're
we
like,
watched it last Christmas,
I-
and we tried to explain that to a small child when I myself was trying to understand what I was actually watching.
yeah.
Um,
I was
yeah.
watching. I watched that with my parents. Like, do you know what I mean? And we just about got it like on the kind of like spiritual and like kind of like metatextual levels. It's kind of in the themes that it's dealing with. It's like it's an animation for adults. I don't feel like that
Yeah.
one that one's like almost not for kids, or at least I don't know. I feel like they tackle that idea of death a lot better with something like oh, why is it escaping me right now? It's not the Book of Life. Is what was the Pixar animation
Oh,
about?
Coco, yeah,
Coco.
Coco.
Yeah. Which is like has lots in there. At least it has like these kind of vibrant colors and kind of like, do you know what I mean? Action
Yeah.
sequences where it's like Soul. I don't know. It kind of looks. It looks like an Apple interface almost, like for most of it, and it's kind of got this like clinical look to it, and like the messages and meanings. Like I don't know,
And like because it's from the director of Inside Out, and Inside Out, I've watched several times. My daughter, she quite likes it because the main film is bright and colorful and has this like adventure storyline going through it. And then along with that, it's about a young girl coming to terms with the complexity of her emotions. And there I am crying at the end when she's saying she can't be happy, because you kind of flash back to the point when you realize that you're not always going to be happy. And it's a really sad moment that everyone goes through.
Yeah.
My daughter never quite understands why I'm crying at that point. She kind of looks up and goes, "You're being a bit weird," and keeps watching this bright, colorful film. Whereas Soul didn't have that kind of attachment between its like bright and colorful stuff. So like the cat stuff, where the guy and where the two souls go into the bodies and they have a body swap situation. She loved that bit,
Yeah.
but it's just one segment, and it doesn't have this kind of like connected story going through that a child who's 5 can be like, I'm into this level. A lot of it is like for us, and it's going like, maybe you shouldn't just obsess about this one thing all the time, and a kid's not going to care about that. Whereas I'm like, oh god, what?
Yeah.
I've been into films for all my life. What does that mean?
Yeah, and I guess I want to like pivot the conversation to talk about like Christmas films. And the first thing I wanted to ask you is, when is it acceptable to start watching Christmas films? Do you have a rule in your household? Is it like this date it's okay to flick on a Christmas film, or is it kind of, or are you kind of freewheeling? If the mood takes you, you're watching whatever you want.
So it's sort of lucky in that my birthday is in the middle of November. So I have a concrete date when I'm like, I don't want to do anything Christmassy until this point. And then after that point, go nuts, go wild. And like this time, like as you said, like I recorded my Christmas episodes at the end of November and the beginning of December, which was lucky because I got COVID after I recorded them. So if I'd waited and I'd done it, I wouldn't be doing Christmas specials. I'd be like having a quiet couple of weeks and not putting anything out. But yeah. So I had this clear date in November, but there are certain films that I watch at Christmas that I'll watch other times of the year. So like Die Hard is a film that I love any time of the year, and I will watch at Christmas because it is a Christmas film to me. Batman Returns is my favorite Batman film and my favorite Christmas film. But I've watched like 2 or 3 times already this year, and I'm going to watch it again in the next couple of weeks because I adore what it does. Yes, there'll be certain films that I can watch, but then like the Home Alones, the Klauses, the Muppets Christmas carols will kind of be brought out from the middle of November onwards. And some of them, like It's a Wonderful Life, I'll try and keep to quite close to Christmas
Mhm.
because makes me cry, and I think it's one of those Christmas films I've just got to watch once and get it into my soul,
Yeah.
and then I'm okay for another couple of months.
So I've never watched It's a Wonderful Life, and I think like this year is the year. And much to my shame, those of you who might follow me on Twitter would have seen I tried to watch a Christmas film this past weekend, which would have been like the 11th and 12th of December. Tried to watch a Muppets Christmas Carol with my son, whose reaction to it was, "I never want to watch this. Turn it off." Which might be down to the fact that he doesn't quite understand the use of the word never, because anytime I try to put a jumper on him, he says, "I never want it on." And it's like, I think what you mean, buddy, is I don't want it on. So
If he's saying it
like,
every time, he does mean he never wants a jumper on. If it's every time he's saying, he's just reiterating his point previously, was like, I stated it at this point, I'm going to state it again until you get it. No jumpers.
yeah, maybe I'm a terrible dad, just forcing jumpers on my son in winter. I really need to reassess a few things. But
Maybe he needs to feel the cold, and then, he'll like understand the importance of a jumper.
yeah, tough. Yeah, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll stick him out in the garden when it's snowing. Be like, "Where's your jump?" Dangling a jumper at the window, going, "Oh,
And just wear all your jumpers and be really puffed up and be like, I've got all my jumpers, I'm really warm.
it's here if you want it, buddy. It's here if you want it. You just got to come inside and ask for the jumper." Yeah, maybe that's what I'll do. Some tough parenting. Thanks for the advice, Russ. So yeah, Klaus is the first like Christmas film I've watched this year, much to my like sugar. And I've got like a kind of a list that I want to get through. Like I'm a massive Home Alone fan. I recently bought some Home Alone trainers, which I think I don't know, probably a man of 30 shouldn't be buying. I don't know, but I think they're subtle enough that I can get away with them, and they're comfy. So as a dad, that's quite important to me now. So before
On the Home Alone front, can I just say, don't watch the new one. Don't
I have
watch
no intention
Home
to.
Sweet Home Alone. I've watched we've tried to watch it twice. We got 20 minutes in the first time. We watched another 20 minutes. And I looked over at my daughter, and she has never looked less infused with a film. And I said, should we watch something else? And she said, yeah, it's a fundamental waste of talent in a way that is impressive.
Yeah, I think so. There's a great podcast called The Bitter End who take franchises and kind of watch them to their bitter end, and they did a season on Home Alone like a few years ago, and I think I was watching along, and like the first three are kind of ingrained in my brain anyway. Like I think yeah, being born in 1991, I kind of like fell into that catchment age where like three is passable, and I kind of explained it to myself in later life as well. It's like, oh well, like John Hughes still had some involvement in that film. I think like he might have like written the story or something like that. So like he's kind of like he's got a foot in the door, like, and it's got some good pratfalls and stuff like that, and a very early Scarlett Johansson performance. And despite the kid not actually being home alone, it's just he's off sick, and there are moments where his parents aren't at home because they're at work. But like, yeah, when it came to I decided to watch number 4, and I think I had a similar experience to what you're describing for the new one, where like not even 20 minutes, I think 10 minutes, I was like, this feels gross. Like this feels gross. And I think that one as well is like it's supposed to be Kevin McAllister as well. And it's like I don't think so, buddy. So let's talk about the Coppola family. And as it's Christmas, I wanted to ask you about what do you think that a Coppola family Christmas is like, Russ?
So I think, as with a lot of Christmas family, it's going to be quite big. Um, it's definitely a Winefield affair, given what his kind of other avenue has been. I think there's going to be a lot of wine. I think the Secret Santa will be incredible. I think you'll get like some of the most incredible gifts, like some rare, never before seen stuff is in there. and I think they'll have a talent show. I think they'll have this like amazing talent show where everyone has to come and do a bit. And if it was televised, it would get great viewing figures. And
What?
of course, as with all extended families, there's an underlying tension. Maybe not, succession levels of tension between the family, but um, I think it's a tense affair. I think, yeah, there's going to be some tension in there.
Yeah,
I think the boyfriends and girlfriends who are fleeting parts of the family will add flavors.
I think to your point of like the talent show, that's a really good point to bring up because I know that when all of the kids were young, like so Sophia, Roman, Jason was involved. Francis Ford Coppola would get them to kind of write like one act plays or like kind of adapt a one act play, and then over the weekend they'd kind of have like theatre camp almost, and then like they would have a few days to prepare it, like kind of get it ready, and then would like perform it. And there's a great story of Jason Schwartzman, like he kind of adapted like a Tennessee Williams play or something like that, kind of made it like this like or Tennessee Williams esque play about these like two men in a bar. And it's like you knew he was destined at that moment to play Max Fisher for one. And then like you kind of like you knew he was destined to become this kind of like I don't know, eccentric but great like kind of comedic actor who kind of like yeah, get like kind of tears through films. Like he's got an amazingly long filmography for somebody who's only been doing it since 1998 or something like that. Yeah, and I definitely agree with you that there definitely will be. I reckon there'd be some tensions around that table. I didn't send you this, but is there anything like from a I don't know, any film that any of the Coppolas have been in, like, what would be your ultimate gift from one of them? Like, would there be like a kind of like movie prop or something like that that you would love to own, Russ?
Oh, what would I love to own? I mean, some of the stuff that gets worn in Bram Stoker's Dracula is just beautiful. Some of those outfits are phenomenal. I'd love to dress like Gary Oldman in that film. I mean, I couldn't pull it off like Gary Oldman can pull off in that film. Uh, maybe the whiskey that he sells in Lost in Translation would be a nice thing to have in the cabinet. I mean, I don't
Oh,
know if it's good
definitely.
whiskey, but it would just be like, and this is the whiskey from Lost in Translation,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I think it's the cloves from Bram Stoker's Dracula or the whiskey from Lost in Translation because and at one I could look fabulous as I go around like Tesco's or Asda trying to do a shop. I just look resplendent in what Gary Oldman wears in that film.
I have an image of you now drinking whiskey by the fire on Christmas, wearing that red kind of armor that
Yeah,
that Gary Oldman wears, and that kind of weird like
yeah,
flesh.
yeah,
Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like the kind of
absolutely.
flesh looking armor. I think that would be a perfect look, Russ. And yeah, I might have to do a really bad Photoshop job of that. Put it on the socials. So what do you reckon like the table setup is? Like who's sitting where? Is there kind of like I don't know, is it a big long table? Is it more of like a kind of spread out affair? Is there a kids table? Is there like an A, B, C table? Do you know what I mean? Like if you've got an Oscar, you can sit at the top table.
I think there's a top table. I think that the talent, the ones that have been like, you've got your Francis, you've got your Sophia, probably Nick is up there because he's a pretty on a good day a phenomenal actor, and touch wood will be Oscar nominated again in about a month's time whenever the Oscars come out
Mhm.
the nominations. Yeah, no, so I think there's a top table. I think then there's like the rest, and the rest are like on tables like at a wedding, and I think it's like mostly family stuff with like a kids table is pushed out on the other end, but it's mostly going to be the families. The family units are going to be there, but the top tier, the creme de la creme of the Coppola family are up there at the top,
Mhm.
and each get to make speeches like a wedding. Like they get to make a speech about Christmas, and each one is a different flavor. I'm assuming Sophia is quite different from her father, and I think that Nicolas Cage's one would be a sight to behold.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage's one would probably be like a he'd have an extract from an Edgar Allan Poe poem or something like that, and like somehow like the the broken heart of man like tells us about at Christmas time that we must respect the crows, but we must also respect the land and the family. And yeah, you can imagine Nicolas
Yeah,
Cage
yeah.
going on some kind of soliloquy like that, some real off the wall shit. And then I find it interesting with Francis Ford Coppola in the fact that uh, obviously he has a winery, and you kind of look at his children, and so his niece Gia Coppola has a wine, Sophia Coppola has a wine, and then there's Roman, who doesn't have a wine. So I always have this image. It's totally fictional, I think, in my head, but I feel like Roman Coppola is like relegated to the kids' table at any function. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, where's your Oscar, Roman? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are you
He's
doing
there
with
by the air conditioning unit, and you got that loud rattle of the air conditioning unit that's like ruining his meal.
Yeah. He goes up to speak to his dad, and he kind of like shoos him off like he's one of the hired help back to the kitchen to get him more bread rolls or something. So what do you think the Coppolas are eating at Christmas? Are they traditional? Are they keeping it Italian? Is there pasta involved, or is it turkey all the trimmings?
I think it's probably turkey with all the trimmings. I mean, in my head, I've now got the. We watched the Vicar of Dibley Christmas special with the multiple Christmas meals last night because it's a great comfort watch. And there's one where they've got like a pasta course. So maybe there's a pasta course, maybe there's a fish course, but there's definitely got to be turkey. And
Hmm.
of course, there's the family wine. You know, there's
Yeah.
definitely going to be bottles of the family wine, and a lot of wine will be drunk. But yeah, I think it's going to be turkey because it's Christmas.
Yeah, I reckon there'll definitely be like a light pasta dish, like these kind of like nice ones where it's just like a kind of spaghetti or a tagliatelle with like a nice olive oil and some kind of herbs
Yeah.
involved. Oh yes, oh it's getting me hungry. So you're invited to this meal, by the way, Russ. Who's the main person you would love to sit next to at the Coppola family Christmas?
Now, I mean, I would love to pick someone like Sophia or Francis or any of the other ones, but I'm going to pick Gia because I want to wrangle Andrew Garfield's number so that I can then gush to him about his film. So it's purely opportunistic on my part. I'll talk to her. I'll wallow in her strange films and all that stuff. But really, I want to talk to Andrew Garfield because I mean, like I just want to talk to him about the films he's made. He seems like a lovely guy,
Yeah.
So that's what I'd be doing. I'd be buttering her up to get Andrew's number just so I can have a chat with him. Maybe invite him onto the podcast so we can talk about his experience in Spider-Man because I mean those films are interesting.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's my pick.
I was thinking recently. I was like, oh, so like I always have like pie-eyed ideas of like, oh, it would be amazing to interview or like interview like big names and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, but I'd have to do it with a reason for the podcast. I was like, oh, Andrew Garfield, I've got two. He's in The
Yeah,
Amazing Spider-Man, which is like DOP'd by John Schwartzman, and is in Mainstream, which is obviously directed by Gia Coppola. And it's like,
yeah,
yeah, I think I'd like to speak to him most just to hear which accent he gives. Do you know what I mean? Because he's kind of got this
yeah.
transatlantic, like sometimes when he's in American interviews, it's a lot more Americanized. When he's in like British interviews, he's all of a sudden like starts calling people mate and like starts, do you know what I mean? Like dropping words and not speaking so proper and stuff like that.
And like because I don't love him, if he is not lovely, if he is a bit rude, a bit of an asshole, I'll be fine because he is my least favorite. I love him as Spider-Man, but his films aren't. I don't ever watch them because no. But I just kind of want to talk to him about like something like Under the Silver Lake, which I mean I hated the first act, then like sort of it was so long that I end up loving it, or like Tick Tick Boom, where
Mm,
his performance is incredible and yeah,
yeah.
I think he's a really talented performer. But if he turns out to not be a nice guy, I'm like, oh, it's not the end of the world. It's fine. Like, had a thing. I fancied Army Hammer for a very long time. He was like my man crush, and then it came out that he's really weird.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
oh no, and I
Yeah,
had to mourn that this year, the loss of my
yeah.
man crush, and then pivot hard into Henry Cavill because
You need some muscle bound hunk in your life,
need
definitely.
a man who's good in a suit.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't be your man, Russ. I'm sorry to disappoint you. So at this Christmas meal, they're doing Secret Santa, and you've got Jason Schwartzman as your pick. Who would have thought it? We're talking about a Jason Schwartzman film, and who's the person you picked out of that hat? What would you buy Jason Schwartzman as a Christmas present, Russ?
It's a tough one. I assume he's a cinephile. I assume he loves films. So I would either get him the Bong Joon-ho box set that came out this year that I haven't got myself, but would dearly love it. So it's all of Bong Joon-ho's films,
Bar
bar
one.
Okja, because Okja doesn't get a release, sadly. Or I'd give him a copy of my favorite film of the year, which is The Mitchells vs. the Machines. One of those two. Like, I think that the greatest gift you can give someone is a DVD or a Blu-ray. Myself, as a lover of physical media,
Mhm.
that's what I'd give him. Or I would give him. So I've got a friend gave me, and it's a really random gift to give him, but I give it because I love it. It's the I've got this poster of a front cover of a newspaper from Batman Returns
Mhm.
of like the Penguin saying he's found his parents. I give him that because I think it's a really great
Yeah,
poster, but I think he'd be like, "Oh, that's a pretty neat film, thank you." Whereas I think the other ones are more just like, "These are great films, watch them."
that's perfect. Yeah, I don't know what I would get Jason Schwartzman. He seems like a man who kind of probably has everything, probably into weird things. I think I heard him on an interview saying like he's really into like model building and like origami and stuff like that. He kind of like picks up little hobbies and then kind of drops them. So I don't know. Maybe I'd buy him like a ship in a bottle. Maybe like maybe that could be his spark a new thing for him. I imagine he's got a kind of yeah, when it came to designing the interiors of his house, he called up his buddy Wes Anderson to be like, "How do I get this to look aesthetically pleasing?" And and Wes came over and said, "Well, what you got to do is like, I'll bring around a mirror so everything's symmetrical, and I'll show you how it's done." So we've talked about Christmas with the Coppolas, but I want to know, how did you first become aware of them as this massive film family? There might have been like, what was your entry point? Was there a person, and when did you kind of figure out the whoa, there's more of them?
I guess it's mostly osmosis in its own way that because I read Empire and Total Film, and I have read those since I was sort of 12 or 13, they kind of will mention the Coppola family fairly often, or they'll talk about films they've made, or they're like I knew that The Godfather was a masterpiece long before I watched it, and I knew that Coppola had this run of films in the 70s and 80s that were masterpieces long before I saw any of them. In fact, my entry point to his work is Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I definitely watched when I was like 12 or 13. My dad definitely lent me a copy of it and was like, "You'll like this." And my dad used to do that with films. He'd watch them and then be like, "This is a film you should watch." So he'd give me like, Alien or Event Horizon or The Thing or something like that, and it definitely would have given me Bram Stoker's Dracula because it's great fun and it's big and colorful and gothic and weird, and there's weird energy to it. He loves films with weird energy, so I think I saw that before I saw The Godfathers, before I saw any of the more classic Francis Ford films. And we studied Sophia Coppola at university fairly early on. So I did
Mhm.
film and literature at university, and one of our first films was Lost in Translation, which I'd watched before. I'd watched it before, but struggled with, and then we had to watch it twice as part of this course. I still have never really fallen in love with that film, but I got more out of it when I was studying it because you kind of get the beauty of the piece, but the piece still doesn't do it for me. So it's probably probably reading Empire and Total Film. They would definitely have mentioned the Coppolas, and then you start to understand there are other family members involved. So like Jason's name will pop up, or um, yeah, and then obviously with Nicolas Cage, I mean, he was probably a fixture of my teenagehood because of like Face Off, Con Air, and The Rock. I
Mhm.
definitely watched those as a teenager a lot. Those are the films that I would have watched as a teenager and been like, yeah, this is amazing
Yeah,
cinema, and
yeah.
like, but yeah, so it's got to be Empire and Total Film, then it's got to be like Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's got to be my entry points in this family,
That's,
and the rest of the time it's just it kind of builds up and up and up, and then you asked me to come on, and I looked at the family tree you gave me, and oh, it's actually incredibly complicated. And there's a lot of names on there that
yeah.
I hadn't thought about, like Spike Jonze, who phenomenal director. Um, Henry twigged that it was linked, and then it's things like the
Y
composers and the directors of photographies that are all linked in. Everything that links in is really interesting. But yeah,
yeah, I think that
uh,
that thing of Spike Jones is really interesting, especially in relation to Lost in Translation, because if you kind of look at that in the chronology of, Sofia Coppola's life, it's you can cherry pick that Lost in Translation is somewhat about Spike Jonze and somewhat, I think, possibly about Quentin Tarantino, because they were kind of like the two people that she had dated before. The two people before she dated before making that film. So I guess like
Does that mean you get to talk about Tarantino at all, or is
no,
there like
because
not?
he wasn't married. So
Okay, that's the
Spike Jonze was like, as we talk about Christmas, he definitely would have spent a couple of Christmases, I guess, at the Coppola family estate. That's why I'm only covering Spike Jonze for that brief period when he was married. So being John Malkovich and Adaptation, the only two films he made when they were together. So this is an off the wall question. Have you ever met a Coppola, Russ? Have you ever bumped into Roman Coppola whilst you're walking down Oxford High Street? Have you ever bumped into Gia Coppola whilst you're in Marks and Spencer's? Yeah.
Sadly not. I've never bumped into any of them, although I had a colleague for a couple of years where I currently work, and her parents lived in one of the villages that Nicolas Cage has a house in.
Amazing.
So that's as close as I've got to him, and it took a lot for me not to just be like, I'm going to travel to this village, I'm going to hunt him down, I'm going to talk to him. But yeah, it was that's the closest I've got to them. Uh, but sadly, none of the other Coppolas have ever come into my world.
Well,
sadly.
there's still time, Russ. Don't worry. There's still time. There's still time for you. There's still time for me. So we'll get there. Don't worry.
Have you met any of them?
No. The closest I've come like to meeting a Coppola. No, it's like so. I'll pull back the curtain and reveal this. There is I wrote a list at the beginning of the year of things I wanted to achieve on the podcast. And one of them was to speak to a Coppola, like for the podcast. And I'm yet to do so. I guess the closest I've come in some ways is like I recently interviewed the head of like restoration and the American Zoetrope archive, who James Mikowski, who works very closely with Francis Ford Coppola. So I like to think in some way that like the Coppola family know about me. Like I had emails with Nicolas Cage's manager this year, like got declined, but like there's part of me that is like Nicolas Cage knows about this podcast. Do you know what I mean? I think like I don't know.
Yeah.
2022, who knows? Maybe maybe I'll be able to speak to a Coppola. A couple of them follow me on Twitter, so maybe I'll muster up the courage and be like, "Hey, come on the podcast, let's hang out."
Maybe you'll get Gia if they do a proper advertising, proper like press tour for mainstream. I mean, I don't know what's happening with that film. It was premiered a while back, and it seems to be somewhere in the ether.
Well, I think it's out because I listened to an interview recently with Andrew Garfield. I think they're the person they've pushed out for the press tour because he was on the newest episode of the Empire Film Podcast talking about mainstream and dodging questions about Spider-Man No Way Home. So what would have been the first Jason Schwartzman film you would have seen, Russ?
So I, as with a lot of film people, keep a letterboxed account and try and tick off all the films I've watched. And I had a look at that, and it's probably, I mean, the earliest one that he's released is Rushmore, but I think the film that I watched was I Heart Huckabees, because I saw that when it came out in the cinema. So I think the first Jason Schwartzman I saw was I Heart Huckabees, and I actually I have a soft spot for I Heart Huckabees. I mean, it's got all the problems of a philosophical film from its time, but I kind of have a soft spot for it. I think it's quite fun. I think it's quite enjoyable to watch relatively famous actors star in this film that's kind of weird and has ideas going on in it. And even if it doesn't all hold together, even if it's a bit like, stranger than fiction in that it's simplifies its ideas to tell a fun romp. So it has to be I Heart Huckabees, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'd seen Rushmore before that. I mean, like I've seen all the Wes Anderson films, so there is that. But yeah, it's probably I Heart Huckleberries.
A film I'm yet to watch and obviously yet to cover on this podcast, but like,
It's probably not aged well, if I'm honest. I
yeah,
say that I have a fondness for it, but I haven't watched it in years.
it's got the whole David O. Russell thing going against it as
Yeah.
well, and it almost feels like from looking at it, it looks like David O. Russell almost going, "Oh, Wes Anderson's doing these all-star ensemble casts. Like, maybe I should do that as well." Like, I think it's like kind of in quite close proximity to like the Royal Tenenbaums and stuff like that.
And that's why you got Jason into it, because whether the Wes Anderson connection, and Jason's in all those Wes Anderson films.
Yeah.
So hoik him in, and yeah.
That's a rare double Coppola. Well, not a rare one, but like that's one where it's Jason and his mum, Talia Shire, both in that film. So yeah, it is on the list to be covered. I've got a guest lined up for that one. So yeah, expect I Heart Huckabees next year, I guess. Yeah, I'll get around to it then. So let's talk about Klaus. And before we do, here's the trailer.
Hello? Jesper Johansson, postman. Mr. Klaus.
You have a gift. You were meant for making toys. So I figured if you donate your old toys, I'll deliver them for free.
Tonight, I go with you.
There's no need for you to come with me, really. Tonight, then.
Our cousin told us if we write a letter to Mr. Klaus, he'll make us a toy. Dear Mr. Klaus. Dear Mr. Klaus.
Shall we then?
Yep.
Mr. Klaus is the coolest.
Klaus? What about me? Ow! What the loser? Oh yeah, well if I'm a loser, then you're too far. You're gone.
Hey, what do you guys think you're doing? This is Smearensburg, the unhappiest place on earth. And you two can't change that.
The postman and toy maker are brainwashing everyone!
We need to show people that a true, selfless act always sparks another.
Hi! What's happening right now? Oh no.
Holy mother! What happened?
Not a word. You just sit there, be all magical and awesome.
Jesper, we're doing it. Let's go!
Wait, time out. Really? That's how you laugh? Come on, we're running out of time. Those kids are counting on us.
If we don't stop them tonight, this town will never be the same!
Destroy those toys!
No! Ha! Eat our snow, you... They're not attached. Why aren't they attached? I thought they were attached. I would never, in a million years, have done what I just did if I didn't think these were attached.
So, Russ, what is your relationship with this film, and when did you first see it?
So I have a pretty positive relationship with this film. I first saw it when it came out. So when it first came on Netflix, I watched it probably the weekend after it came out. So the nature of my job means I'm aware of everything being released in cinemas in Oxford and the surrounding area. So I have to put them into the website I run on. We put all the showtimes in. So I'm just super aware of what's coming out, and I live vicariously through that. So I don't watch all the films or all the other stuff. I'm like, oh, this film's on, and I can kind of keep tabs in my head. And so this, I was aware of when it screened at a cinema in Oxford, and I thought it looked fabulous. And so I watched it when it came out, and yeah, it was fabulous. I immediately took to this film. It made me cry the first time I watched it, and it makes me cry every time. We'll probably get into the fact that it makes me cry. But yeah, no, so yeah, I have watched this every year since. I mean, it's only been out for 2 years, but I've probably watched it a dozen times already. So I've watched it 4 or 5 times a year. it's a firm staple in our festive roster. It's one of the ones I can watch fairly early on because it's not like Home Alone or Gremlins or It's a Wonderful Life, and that those feel like staples that I have to watch quite close to Christmas. This feels like one that I can watch several times in a year, and I love this film for what it is.
I know what you mean. Like Home Alone for me has got this thing in my head that I have to kind of watch it in like the time frame in which it like plays out. I kind of like, do you know what I mean? It's like it's a few days before Christmas I have to watch it, and like I have to get a cheese pizza, and I have to get a cheese a whole cheese pizza all to myself. Like I have to get that. Like I remember a few years ago I watched Home Alone, like had the cheese pizza, and then like woke up in the morning. I was like, still living at home at the time. And like woke up in the morning and everyone had like gone to work, and I kind of had that like Kevin McAllister moment of like kind of like Mom, Dad, Uncle Frank, Buzz, like everyone was gone. I was like,
Yeah.
I was in my 20s, so I don't know what I was going to do that I wouldn't have done anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, probably a lot more sordid than what Kevin McAllister gets up to. I weren't jumping on any beds.
Oh, very gentle what he does. Nothing too.
Yeah. He just tries to kill a couple of like middle-aged blokes. So did you get to see Klaus in the cinema? You said it was.
I
screened-
didn't. I kind of wish I had, but it's like one of these Netflix releases that gets like a week in the cinema, and I don't that often see them. Like I think I saw The Irishman in the cinema because I was like, Scorsese in the cinema, gonna go watch that, and I saw Roma as well because I go to the London Film Festival every year, and there'll be films that I'm lucky to catch, but I don't tend to watch Netflix films in the cinema, which is to my fault. But I'm like, I'll watch them when it comes to Netflix. Same attitude with this. Like, I didn't see in the cinema.
Same thing. I had the same thing this week. I was like trying to I've got a pretty like hectic podcast week this week, and but I was like looking, and I was like, oh, Don't Look Up is playing at the Everyman near me, and I was like, I've kind of like been jonesing for an excuse to go there. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like lovely building, lovely cinema and stuff like that, and I was like, oh, that could be like my little Christmas treat to myself. And I was like, if only I had like scheduled myself better and wasn't recording like a podcast every night of the week this week, I could have gone to check out that film. But yeah, there is that thing. Like one of the reasons I didn't go see it, like yourself, is like, oh well, it's on Christmas Eve on Netflix. Do you know what I mean? That feels like the type of thing like I don't know, I could probably persuade my parents on Boxing Day to maybe like after a couple of mulled wines we can sit like I don't know, I won't tell them about the kind of Adam McKay of it all and just be like, Meryl Streep's in it, and they'll be like, oh, if Meryl's in it, let's give it a watch. And then before I know it, I've kind of like indoctrinated them with some kind of what is it like environmental like kind of like, do you know what I mean, like messaging,
The message like, and did you get the message at the end? This is the message.
We're destroying the planet, guys. Come on, stop using so much plastic. So Klaus, like, I think I'm similar to you, and well, not that I had no idea it was coming out. I think like 2019. I think I saw like when it came on Netflix or like on social media or something like that, and then saw that like just the animation style of it. It's like, oh, that looks really interesting, and it's like it's the first Netflix animation, right? Like which. I think
it's the first that they co-funded. I think there were animations that they purchased to distribute, but this is the one that they commissioned to get made, and so it is a Netflix film more than something like The Mitchells vs. the Machine, which is just because
a Sony film.
Sony stopped releasing animation in cinemas. So that and Vivo are the two recent Netflix ones that are not Netflix films, but Netflix have like exclusive streaming rights to them. But this is like a small studio made this. Netflix commissioned them to make it, and it's a Netflix film. And I kind of quite admire sometimes when Netflix does this, like when it works, when they pull off these like really good, interesting films. Like Roma wouldn't exist without them. The Irishman wouldn't exist without them. But then there are some other ones that Like, I watched Red Notice the other day, and
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. But yeah, that's what I mean. For every 10 red notices, there's an Irishman, or there's like this new like the Fablesman that's coming out next year, which is the new like Steven Spielberg film. Do you know what I mean? Or it's like you kind of have to take the rough with the smooth, like with Netflix.
and you get like a Klaus, you get this kind of
yeah,
warm, endearing film that is not like many other animations out there that is its own unique thing, and yeah, I appreciate this film. I appreciate Netflix for being a studio that would do this, and kind of having set a model that someone like Apple TV are now doing, because they release things like Wolfwalkers on this, and Netflix have done a lot of animation that they've got coming up is interesting. So they've got like Henry Selick. There's all their Roald Dahl stuff, which I'm very interested in.
Big shout out to my boy. Oh, well, yeah, a mutual friend of ours, David Trumbull.
Oh, I will say at this point, thank you, because that was a really great 2-hour chat, and it only happened because you're like, hey, there's this guy who like knows about animation. You should talk to him. And I was like, okay, and I did, yeah. And then I went up and talked to his brother about The Grinch. That was another good 2-hour conversation. Those two guys are verbose but fabulous, and they gave me such fabulous episodes to put out. But yeah, so thank you for the thread.
I had to give David a shout out, especially talking about an animated film. And I imagine like he'll probably be listening to this being like, did you know, like almost like butting in, like with these things, like wanting to butt in, be like, did you know they did this and this and this and this and this, and then we'll get onto some stuff that hopefully will make David proud. I did my research on the animation style for this.
Yeah.
So I like to ask all my guests to kind of give us a little plot synopsis of the film. Can you tell us what Klaus is about?
Sure. To not dive too much into spoilers, because I do think there'll be people out there who will have not seen this.
Oh, we will be spoiling this eventually. We will be.
But at this point, I'll limit the spoilers, because it's one of these films that I think Netflix have this weird thing where they seem to undermarket their own films and seem to just wait for people to find them, which I always find kind of odd. But Klaus. So Klaus is about Jasper, who has a rather dubious honor of being the worst student in the Postal Academy. And his father, who runs the postal service, sends him off to a small icy village fabulously called Sirensburg. And he is set with the task of delivering a certain number of letters. I think he has to deliver 6,000 letters in a year to be allowed back home, where all his creature comforts are, where he gets like nice drinks, comfortable sheets, all this other stuff. And he can be away from this icy hell that he finds himself in. What complicates Sirensburg is that there are two families waging a gang war, not dissimilar to gangs of New York at the start, which is one of the great things about this film. And there he also finds a local teacher who's desperate to leave, and a carpenter who lives alone in a cabin full of handmade toys. He's a strange figure who comes into the film about 20-30 minutes in. And with all this, he concocts a scheme that draws in the teacher and carpenter to leave, and they don't know that he wants to leave, but he concocts this scheme to draw in the children so they will send letters to a Father Christmas-like figure. And in his own way, he begins to shape a Christmas legend, and he starts to create a figure like Father Christmas. And that's what Klaus is about. Oh, Klaus is the name of the carpenter.
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to play a quick clip of the kind of his dad giving him them kind of marching orders of setting up kind of what his mission is.
You think I'm just going to watch you purposely fail and then let you waltz right back to a privileged life void of any purpose or meaning?
Well, yeah. Where else would I...
Congratulations. You are now a postman.
Come again?
You are to establish a working postal office in... Smirensburg. You've got 1 year.
What? A year? Where? Smirensburg? What's happening right now? Dad!
6,000 letters will suffice, stamped by your own hand. And listen carefully, Jesper. If you fail to get those letters, you're cut off. No more fancy apartments, stagecoach, clothes, galas, all gone. You can look forward to a cozy spot in the gutter.
But...
6,000 letters, 1 year. You can't cheat, bribe, or squirm your way out of this one.
That is somewhat what he does, right? Though, right? He does
Yeah.
he does almost bribe a town full of people with.
He plays the system so he can get out. He is kind of a corrupt figure at the start who just uses people's because he just wants to leave, and that's his goal is to leave. So he uh, lies to a group of children. He lies to what we find out is a grieving man out in the woods. He lies to a teacher who has a fondness for him in that blossoms into something more. But yeah, it's for the first half he's this lying, cheating, corrupt individual who's just doing everything so he can get the hell out of this place.
What I think is like really like endearing about this is it kind of like borrows things from different stories. It's almost got that kind of like Scrooge-like character at the in the middle of it in Jesper, in the idea that like he kind of all he cares about is himself, and like you kind of know from the outset that like his kind of caviar filled heart is going to melt, and kind of he's gonna throw away the fineries in life
Yeah.
to appreciate that like all it takes is an act of kindness to provide another act of kindness. And I think Jason Schwartzman is perfect for a film like this because he can do this like slightly smugness, and he can but like an innocence to him that no matter how smug he's being, you kind of like you're warm to him. Like they
Yeah.
play it really well, I think, in this film, that like he doesn't feel like an absolute arsehole. Do you know what I mean? You are still rooting for Jesper despite like, and it's the kind of machinations of the plot work in such a way that like you almost like you forget about this ploy because he's getting caught up in it. You can see the joy on his face and the joy that he's bringing to this town that you're not there going, oh yeah, but once he gets to 6,000 letters, he's fucking out of there. He's like, bye Smearensburg, bye Smearensburg. Like you guys are in the dust. I'm going back to my life of caviar and silk sheets. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
Jason
he's not an irredeemable person. He is selfish at the start and dislikable in that sense. And yeah, Jason plays it fabulously, and we've like one of his most memorable roles for me is Gideon Grave or Gray in Scott Pilgrim, and like playing that fantastic asshole villain that he does. And there is hints of that at the start, and then it kind of melts away. And the whole thing with any of these kind of films that are about people doing duplicitous schemes is that as the scheme goes on, obviously they will get more into where they are, they will get more into the people they're surrounded by, and so the scheme will kind of go to the background for them. They're doing it because they've kind of developed a warmth and kindness within them, and that's what this is. It's about developing warmth and kindness, and it's a fascinatingly cold film at the start that kind of a warmth kind of breeds within it and kind of gets warmer and warmer as it goes on. But it starts with this wonderfully cold film that's just beautifully done, but so cold and so not unpleasant but unwelcoming. It's really interesting that as a film it's quite unwelcoming at the start. It doesn't draw the audience in by being warm at the start. It says this is a cold place, these are cold people, there is no kindness, there is no warmth here. And then it kind of develops beyond that point. It develops into this point where as Jasper softens and becomes warmer, as Klaus opens up and becomes warmer, as I should know her name, the teacher
Alva, yeah.
Alba becomes warmer and kinder, as the kindness kind of as with a virus, but not in a negative way, a positive way. A positive virus kind of spreads through this village and through these people, and we kind of see it happen. And Jason's performance is really good at capturing that kind of shift within him as he becomes less and less of a selfish asshole and more of this kind of kind, nice, friendly person, right up to the point that makes me cry, which is where he is there making a sled for the village girl
Yeah, the Sammy girl.
That entire sequence, I'm
Yeah.
weeping throughout because I think it's a beautiful sequence. Yeah, so at that point where he is so invested in this, in the positive side of the scheme, so investing in toys to children, that he'll make a toy, even though he has none of the skills he needs to, even though we have established that he's lazy and untalented as a person, and willfully untalented, like he's willfully sought to avoid responsibility and avoid skilling up, and that's the wonderful shift. And yeah, Jason's performance carries that shift from him, so that by the end, when he is this nice person, we can go with it, and we even like it, and we even accept it, and we're kind of fine with it, even though at the start he is selfish and kind of dislikable.
Yeah, to your point of like the kind of coldness of this film, I think some of that comes down to the way that this film is animated and like the animation design of Sneerensburg, and the idea that everything is angular. It's a lot of like sharp corners, a lot of triangles. Do you know what I mean? Everything looks
Yeah.
very angular, almost like Tim Burton-esque or Henry Selick-esque in that kind of way, that it's like
Yeah.
decrepit and stuff like that. And then when you get to Klaus's kind of cabin out in the middle of nowhere, everything's a lot more softer edges and rounder and stuff like that. And that very much feels like a conscious choice on the parts of the filmmakers, who kind of like, right, let's let's visually tell the audience. And I wanted to talk about the kind of animation style, because there's something kind of magical about it in the way that like you watch it and it feels, even though it's like from 2019, watching it for the first time, it felt, I don't know, it felt familiar at the same time, but like totally kind of groundbreaking. And I know that they used like kind of groundbreaking technology to kind of get the visual style that they do. So yeah, what are your kind of views on this animation style that they use?
So like I think there's this movement in 3D animation that I really appreciate, which is kind of a move away from it being photorealistic, almost being like the best animation can be. So like, I mean, that's still what Pixar are doing. Pixar's still out there making as close to humans as possible, all that stuff. Whereas the really animation that I've drawn to is the one that kind of is learning from what worked with 2D animation, which is imperfections, and kind of putting in this. So you say like there's like the angular design, like the village is designed and it's very rickety, and the characters themselves are never kind of, they're not realistic proportions. There's like the two giant kids, one from each set of family, and they're huge, and the character design makes them unrealistically big. And then you've got Joan Cusack's character is bent double and looks frail, and there is that kind of Henry Selick, Tim Burton, even Quentin Blake's Roald Dahl drawings. So like I have just started, because why not, reading to my 5-year-old Roald Dahl's books, and we've just read George's Marvelous Medicine, and there's something about the way that Quentin Blake interpreted Roald Dahl's words and Roald Dahl's description of characters that I think is in this. I think that the characters are free to be exaggerated in places, and there's exaggeration here in the characters, and and then the world is very angular and rickety, and yeah, like uses that for the comedy. So like there's the bit where he lives and he has to go to the toilet, and it's all rickety and the way it's animated. But it's also, if we just take the opening sequence of the fight of the, when he rings, so he enters this village, rings a bell, and that causes the two families to fight, and it turns into a sequence from Gangs of New York. And so they limit what you see because it takes place in a sea of not smoke, but kind of like a fog descends,
like those dust clouds that you
it's like a dust cloud of ice
animation.
gets up, and so you get that, and then you see him like at one point get flung out and burst through the cloud, and it kind of zooms out, and you get like a far off shot of him going up in the sky and coming back down through it. And so it's willing to be playful in how it animates itself. It's willing to be playful in the shots it's choosing. It's quite cinematic in how it's constructed, and even cinematic in the sense that it goes from being cold to warm, and it uses the seasons as a means to kind of open itself out and become something different, and that's in the animation style itself, that the animation style becomes warm, and you can see that there's like clearly someone there who's talked them through lighting and how lighting impacts the scene. And
Well, this film is like is groundbreaking in the way that like it is all still like apart from a few small things is 2D animation, but they came up with this like lighting and texture like kind of pack, like kind of AI almost that the animators could go in and fine tweak
yeah,
that kind of created this look for the characters that it feels like that's what's magic about it. It feels like a kind of a trick. It's like an optical illusion in the thing that's like you feel 3D, and it's almost like at times it feels like 3D characters inhabiting like a 2D landscape. And I know that like they used a lot of like scenic layers, so like to get that idea of like a depth of field and stuff like that. But it's all 2D and like
yeah,
yeah, the way that like the characters look, and there's a great video which I'll put in the show notes to this that kind of like breaks it down very quickly. And I know that Sergio Pablos kind of has this rich history with Disney, right? Like kind of
yeah. So like his career was initially as an animator at Disney, and so how Disney worked with their 2D animation was they would have specific animators on for specific characters. So like he did Frollo in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, he did Paris in a Goofy movie, he did Tantor in Tarzan, and he did Hades, one of my favorite animated characters ever. He animated Hades and Hercules, and so there is that element to him that most of his career is not spent as a director. This is his directorial debut. He was a writer on Despicable Me, but his work is so much been about animation. That's why I guess the character design here is one of the strengths of how this looks, in that every single character feels like they've had one person work on them for 6 months to come up with the perfect way for them to look and feel and walk, and their gestures are perfect. So how Jasper, his gesticulations are so spot on. The little girl from the village is so perfectly animated. All of it feels perfect on the character side of things. And I guess that comes from the fact that he spent the 90s into the noughties as the person at Disney animating these now iconic figures.
Yeah, and I know that there's like so this film predates. There's like a short you can. I'm not sure if it's available anywhere, but there's a short that is from 2015, which is like a kind of proof of concept of what they were trying to go for. And I know at the time they worked with like a French studio to kind of develop the AI they were working on, because I think in that original kind of like thing they had created with like this AI to work on the lighting and textures, it was too labor intensive, and they were like, well, this film will never get made. Do you know what I mean? It would have been like 10 years in the making or something like that. And then this French studio, which I think it's called like Maison de Rouge or something like that. Again, David Trumbull is probably going, it's this company right now. But yeah, they kind of came on board to really help them out with kind of fine tweaking the AI to make it a more like fluid process. And I think it's something like there's like 400 people who worked on this film or something like that, like close to like 100 animators or something like that. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it all really feels like it's made with love. I just kind of, there is something, I think it's crazy for a film to be so new, but just feels like, do you know what I mean? It almost feels like something that like you've blown the dust off of a VHS that like has been hidden in the back of a video shop since 1993 or something like that.
Yeah, and I think because it's this film that is different from its peers, it's out here doing its own thing. I mean, there are similar styles of films out there, but Klaus feels like Klaus. And there's like a raft of films that feel like versions of DreamWorks animations or Pixar animations. And then you get other unique studios doing their own thing. But this feels unique and almost timeless in that quality, because also its interpretation of Christmas is not very not very American.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very European interpretation of Christmas. What it's drawing off of are the myths and legends of Christmas in Europe, in like Germany or in Scandinavia or places like that. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why it endears to me, is because I don't really warm to an American version of Christmas too much myself. I'm more of a, Rizzo the Rat in a Victorian London kind of guy as opposed to anything else. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why it feels out of time, out of sync almost, is because it isn't trying to be like other animations, other Christmas films. It's trying to be almost European focused.
Yeah, well, the fact that it's like it's a Spanish production company, and it's kind of like it feels like this, and it feels, I don't know, it feels freeing. I know that Sergio Pablos has said that Jason Schwartzman, when it came to his dialogue, like 40% of what he says was the script, like the rest is ad-libbed. And you kind of really get that, you get that feeling in the way he delivers things, and like it's kind of like it feels fresh, it feels, and it I don't know, like I imagine like in some like American animation, it would like they would either go, well, you look back at like Aladdin or something like that, it's like Robin Williams is probably 100% like ad-libbed and stuff like that, but this kind of feels
he's
like,
doing stand-up and they're animating his stand-up, basically. That's what Aladdin is.
And then, but this like feels like, I don't know, there's like a freeness to it, to kind of like find the character and kind of like, here is the bare bones of the story, like, and the message, like the message is still going to stay the same, but like really, really work around it and like work with it. And it's, I don't know, there's just this, there's so much beauty in this film. So let's talk about some of like your favorite scenes in this film.
Of course,
Russell.
Yeah. So obviously, like we've talked about the opening fight, which is probably my favorite bit of animation in this film, because it is so chaotic and energetic a moment to fling into this opening that's been a bit slow and cold. But yeah, I love this film. I love how it introduces characters. I love the first time we meet Klaus, for example, out in his woodland retreat, essentially, because he's basically retreated from the world. I like all that stuff, and how, again, that's being led by the energy of Schwartzman's Jasper, because Schwartzman does all the talking in that scene up until the first time J.K. Simmons talks, and that's a great sequence. And it has a lot of fun then with their kind of their escapades, their kind of delivery of gifts. And so we get some nice short scenes of Jasper being hurt or kind of having to do with dogs, fire, all this other stuff. And it's just there being used for us to make him into an endearing figure, kind of that kind of like transition from a selfish prick into a nice guy.
The film's not scared as well to play that scene of when Jasper first goes out to Klaus's like cabin. It's like quite scary. Like I'd like to know if
there's an intimidating quality to Klaus that never really leaves the character, never really is not an intimidating figure.
Yeah, and that feels quite European, right? It kind of feels like it's borrowing that like element of like the Krampus almost. Do you know what I mean? Of that thing of like there is a danger to Santa almost. This thing of like, and this film establishes like the naughty list and stuff like that, and does it in such like a playful manner and stuff like that. And yeah, so like one of the kids like, and I love the way that comes about as well. That a kid like calls Jasper a loser and tells him to go
and throws
home.
a snowball at him, and
and like when he realizes that's the kid he's delivering a present to, he gives him a lump of coal, and that's where that kind of idea comes from.
Yeah,
and then Jasper delivers this like kind of speech to that kid when confronted.
I sent my letter and all I got was a lousy clump of coal.
Well, it serves you right. Devilish little tadpoles like yourself don't get toys from Klaus.
Oh yeah? And how would he know what I'm up to unless you ratted on me?
Oh, I didn't have to. He knows.
What do you mean?
He sees everything, you know. Every mischief, prank, and dirty deed. He keeps a list. The naughty list, he calls it.
You lie.
Trust me, you do not want to be on the naughty list.
What I love about this film is the way it like plays with myth making and like kind of like all of these things that like we've come to know as like the rules of Santa Claus and the way that Santa operates, but the beauty of how that kind of stuff can come to be and like the joy that it instills in children and stuff like that. And there's that moment where all the kids are kind of like through kind of like a thing of like, do you know what I mean? Like kind of, I don't know, like telephone, I guess the Americans would call it. It's I'm trying to think of the politically correct version of that isn't a derogatory. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like,
So they have like the story kind of evolves as it's told around the village, and that is a really great thing about this film, is that it's about the act of storytelling. It's about how the community itself tells the story, how it takes things. So there's about halfway through a confrontation sequence, the two families who decide they're going to work together, and one of the many amazing moments with Joan Cusack, who is fantastic in this film, and you always forget just how amazing Joan Cusack is. But in this, she's fantastic as Mrs. Crumb, and she gives one of her many great speeches about this is the way things are.
yes,
And then they get chased, and because they get chased and they kind of fly through the air on their sled with their reindeer, a child sees that, and so it becomes added to the myth that Claus flies. He flies, and that's how he distributes his toys. And so it's just this wonderful points are made that all these things, like Jasper putting in a bit of coal into the kid who doesn't like as his delivery, becomes part of the story, and it becomes more and more story. And it's kind of like the acts of kindness multiplying are tied into this kind of story that's being kind of blossomed and complicated by the children, almost separate to the people running the scheme, because they're just doing their thing, and little snippets of that will then feed into a wider story of who this Klaus figure is.
Here's some of the things that the kids like talk about, and I guess like a lot of them we know to be the things that kind of Santa does.
In the morning, the present is right there by the fireplace. Yeah, Mr. Klaus is amazing. Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah.
Klaus? Awesome?
He's huge, but he can squeeze down any chimney. Really? How? I don't know. Magic, I guess. If you leave your socks hanging on the mantle, Mr. Klaus will fill them with toys. He only comes when you're sleeping. No one has ever seen him. It's like he's invisible or something. Oh, and he likes cookies. Don't forget to leave out some cookies.
What I love about that is the fact that all of that is interplayed with Jesper kind of like going in and out of the houses and stuff like that. And it's I think that's one of the things that this film really speaks to, and I think is at the core of what this film is about. That obviously, like, the myth, the legend is this lone figure Santa Claus who's doing all this stuff, but what this film is really talking about is those acts of kindness, and it's almost any of us can be Santa. And I feel like it's kind of, it feels like it would be a beautiful like transitionary film for a kid when like that inevitable conversation comes, when like you have to talk to your kids about when they've heard at school that Santa's not real. And then like I think this film will be a great tool for them to kind of like go, hey, it doesn't it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? It's the fact, like, if I can give you a gift, if you can do something nice for someone, like the idea of Santa exists. Like it's not a tangible thing, but it's like the idea can still be real. Do you know what I mean? Like no matter how old you are,
Yeah.
even now at the kind of, I don't know, cynical age of 30 or older, like I can still kind of have that Christmas magic, and it's the joy of kind of doing something nice. It might not even be like giving a gift. Like that's just a nice way of kind of visualizing it, and kind of like, I don't know what, in this capitalist stink cesspit that we live in, is kind of a good representation to show your affections and kind of appreciation for other people. But this film really gets to the heart of it, and it is those beautiful things to like share with people, and kind of bringing people together that means more than kind of Christmas. And we can all, yeah, it's almost like that thing of, it's that Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse thing. It's anyone can kind of put on the mask. You can kind of, anyone can be Spider-Man, anyone can be Santa. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like you can, if you do that act of kindness, whether it's not about giving to receive, but it's like that could make someone's day, and they want to do something great for somebody else. And it's kind of, we all keep doing that, then we'll all be in a much better place. We'll be in that be in an ideal utopia that we're yet to see in this world.
Yeah, and there is this wonderful optimism in the film that even where the authority figure, so the two sets of families, are set on fighting, and they kind of unify so they can get back to the position where they're fighting, it's this idea that that kind of kindness and hope will not be killed straight away. It can still foster and exist, because the people who are doing it are the young, small children. So that's part of who they are now, is that they'll be kind and they'll pay it forward and they'll help heal the community around them. So it's quite optimistic about what young people can do, which, I mean, given the state of the world, we kind of need young people to be uh, to be able to heal the world. In a not Michael Jackson sort of way, in a like a nice, not in that sort of way. But yeah, and like this whole like kids telling stories and creating a myth. That's what children do anyway. That's what my daughter does anyway. She'll talk to her friends about things, and they'll create stories and they'll create ideas, and they'll take threads of things and they'll develop their own stories. I did it as a kid, and it'll happen. It is happening with her.
Oh yeah,
And this film captures it really well.
yeah. My son just puts 2 and 2 together and comes up with 5. Like he kind of he's creating myths. He recently told his mum, when she asked him, "Oh, did you have a good weekend at Dada's?" He said, "Yeah, Dada's gone to work. Dada's at the pub. Dada's getting pissed." Which was like a real like kind of like eye-opening moment for both of us. Like, oh, he's done his first swear, but he's obviously figured out somewhere from like hearing conversations that like people go to work and then go to the pub and get pissed. He might have overheard a phone call or something, and has kind of put those things together. But he's just created this myth about me that I don't go to work. I go to the pub and I get pissed. So yeah, even as a 2-year-old, he's ratting me out. On your point about kids, and this is something that like, I think this is one of the things that really gets me, this film, is that there is a thread throughout this film all about how children are like a product of where they live and the environment that they live in. And like that's kind of like what really breaks my heart in this. And it is that beauty in it, that it is the children who can kind of be the future and make that change. And like it's those guys who start like, and there's that other great kind of montage where like they start like they're writing their letters and kind of explaining all of the
Yeah.
nice things they're doing for people, and it's like, oh, and that's where that whole thing, and it's that thing like, it comes from that kind, it can look like, you can look at it quite cynically, where it's like, oh, if you're not nice, you're on the naughty list. But like, it's still like really heartwarming and kind of like great. Do you know what I mean? And it kind of, this film really cleverly strips away that thing of the, I don't know, like manipulative thing of like what the Santa Claus thing could be, because you kind of look at it in one way,
Yeah.
like cynically, and be like, well, if you're not nice, like you're not getting any presents. Or you can kind of
Yeah.
like look at it as like a life lesson of being like, well, just be nice anyway. Do you know what I mean? And like, is that thing like
Yeah, and
we're
it's
all
that
trying to
kind
instill
of
in our kids that to be nice, right?
it's telling them that even if they don't think anyone can see them being nice and um, doing the right thing, someone is seeing that and they will be rewarded for it. And even then, it's not about being rewarded; it's just about being the act of being nice and kind. And one of my favorite moments in this film is linked to the act of writing. It's when the teacher, hold on, Alva teaches a class to write their name. She teaches a child to write their name for the first time, and it's just you get to watch in this film how children that haven't had fun or love or kindness, how they can blossom and better themselves and better the world around them. And the first act they do is to learn to write their name, and that's a really powerful moment. And I think for anyone, but you got kids, and when you can see your kids start to get more and more developed and become, better, more human, as opposed to these like blobs that are running around taking your stuff. Yes, that's a moment I love. I love the way it's played. I love that it's quite subtly played. Like Rashida Jones' performance, that is quite subtle and underplayed. It doesn't dwell too much in that moment of being, hang on a second, these kids can't write.
Mm.
And yeah, it all kind
Yeah.
of feeds in this like representation of children as being capable of being better.
Well, yeah, I think that is that the scene that's kind of capped off with her kind of reaching into her savings to kind of be
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I'm gonna turn this school around. I'm gonna actually like, and it is that, yeah, it's that ripple effect that Jesper doesn't know that he's creating, and it takes her later on to show him like, this is what you've done to this
yeah.
city. Do you know what I mean? This is kind of like what you've shown everything. Yeah, I wanted to play a little clip of Rashida Jones just so people can hear how great this kind of the performance is.
Starting far, far away from here. Where's that, Alva?
Someone would have to be pretty stupid to want to leave this place now, don't you think?
I guess.
You guess? Oh, wow, you have no idea what you've done, do you? Ugh, come on, I'll show you. Now, would you take a look at that?
And she shows him kind of he has turned Smearensburg into kind of like Whoville, right? In this
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
in this
It's got like a
beautiful
nice German market, and there's music being played, and like people who are fighting are now part of a band, and all this stuff. And the film spends 45 minutes slowly opening up the world to show this is happening, showing that these acts of kindness lead to other acts of kindness, which lead to other acts of kindness, which leads to friendship, and this town village that hates itself and hates the other members of its town and village are able to move beyond that point. And it's a really interesting film in how it represents how you heal hate and division, which is that you kind of give something to fill the void that is hate and division. It's that
Mhm.
you put something else in there, which is friendship and kindness and warmth, and yeah, you open up the possibility that there is a better world out there. And that's what Jasper's doing without knowing he's doing it, because he's just doing this because he wants to get out of this place, and he can't see what he's doing up until that moment.
Definitely, definitely. Well, before we get to like the final act of this film and kind of like start to wind down, I wanted to delve into those moments in this film that bring a tear to your eye, just because I found myself like welling up at this. I don't know, 4, 5 times. Like it's really, yeah, it really does get.
Yeah. So there's I think there's probably two threads in this that move me quite a bit, and one of them is the pain that Klaus is going through, and we learn about 2/3 of the way through that the reason why he has all these toys, the reason why he is so good at making toys, is that he was married and was going to have lots of children, and his wife couldn't have children
Well,
and is now dead. I mean, I have a slight issue in that, there's the whole dead wife thing, dead mother thing, which is so rampant in stories that I kind of want to do a letterbox list that has like that as the as the plot trope, which is there's a dead parent.
I'm not trying to make you cry, but I'm gonna play that scene.
You know, I remember the day I first had that very same smile on my face.
What? What smile? I wasn't smiling. I was squinting from the sun.
Right. I didn't want to admit it at first either. She used to tease me about it.
She?
My Lydia. I remember when I found this spot in the woods that she loved. And I built us a house right here. Away from it all. But it wasn't going to be the two of us for long. We wanted children. Lots of them. Running around, laughing, getting in trouble. While we waited, I started making toys for them. And we waited, and I kept making toys and more toys.
Oh, here's another one. What do you think?
And we kept waiting, but they never came. And then she got sick. Even now, sometimes it almost feels like she's still... After she was gone, I guess I got lost. She loved birds, so I just kept making birdhouses. But then you showed up, delivering these toys, seeing the joy they bring to children. I thought I'd never feel this again. And I have you to thank for it, my friend. So, thank you.
Of course.
And just yet, with J.K. Simmons in this is wonderful, and I think I've watched 9 or 8 films he's been in this year, and every time he's in a film, I'm overjoyed that he's in it. But in this, he's so good at getting across Klaus's grief and sense of loss, and I find that animation is quite easy. It's quite easy for animation to kill off a loved one, but it's really hard for them to talk about the act of not being able to have children, and that's one of the things that Klaus does really well, is that it subtly talks about that kind of trauma that a fair few people have to go through, in that they want children but can't have children. And one of the great things for me is to have kids, and is to, as much as they infuriate me, and I spend too much time with them sometimes, particularly during a pandemic. They are great, and it's great to have them. They kind of, particularly Christmas, reshape what Christmas is. And if you don't get that, and if that's what you want, it's a real tragedy. So that's a really moving thread, particularly that moment, because of that acknowledgement that is rarely seen in animation for me, in that some people can't have children, and it doesn't happen for some people, even if they want it. No matter how much you want it, it might not happen.
Yeah, I think it's presented in a way that like children could like it could either go over their head, or like it's there for them to like pick up on. It might lead to some questions, like what does he mean by like they just didn't come? And it's like, I don't know. I think for an animated film to do that, and like I don't know, bring out those discussions in parents and their kids, it's a beautiful thing, because like it is that thing, and it makes, I don't know, to sound selfish, but it makes you cherish your own kids and kind of like impart some kind of like gratitude, like some feeling of gratitude in your kids, that like, hey, it's so lucky that we're all here. Do you get me?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
that's what it is. Like, it's so lucky there's some people out there, and it's that is probably more heartbreaking, like, than the kind of like the dead wife thing just feels like a bit of like, I don't know, it's one of the bugbears in this film. Do you know what I mean? But it's the
Yeah.
fact that like Klaus wanted this, and the fact that all those toys are there for the children he never had.
Yeah, and it gives this reason for why this convenient character exists, who makes toys, who has toys. It gives a reason. It also, you know, creates a complexity in the narrative. Gives a point where they kind of diverge, because he doesn't want to make more toys. He doesn't want to do this because he did it for a reason, and that reason was because he was going to have them with the person he loved. And then it leads nicely into the main sequence that makes me just weep throughout, which is where Jasper has been so reformed, has become such a good person that he is shown by Alva the good he does, and so he brings Margot, who is this girl from a village outside of the surrounding area, who doesn't speak the language, and they come together to translate what she wants to say, and for her to write a letter, and that's in itself beautiful, because it's opening up this story to other children, to children who might not have access to it because of language barriers. And then Jasper goes off to make her a sled, and that brings Klaus out, and Klaus kind of manages to escape the fog of grief that he's in to come and help him make this toy. And then they travel across in a beautiful sequence to deliver the toy, and there's this wonderful shot of them on ice, and there's a whale underneath. And then they watch the child wake up, open a present, and ride it. And it's a really emotionally manipulative moment, because the song it's using is really emotionally manipulative and beautiful. And yet I cry every time like that. I guess because I at that point am very invested in who Jasper is, and to watch him become a good person. And I really like this in film and TV, where it's about someone becoming a good person. It's why I really warmed to The Good Place as a TV show, because that was about people who have been determined to be bad people becoming better people, striving to be good. Because we have many stories about terrible people being terrible, or good people becoming bad people. We've got Breaking Bad, which is phenomenal, Better Call Saul, which is phenomenal. We've just finished Succession, which is about terrible people being terrible to each other, and loved every moment of it. But sometimes I want to be told that, you know, people who have issues can become better, can become good.
Yeah, I had a thought whilst watching this film. Is like, would Jesper be a Roy child if he was like a few hundred years later, in the way that he is kind of like his dad owns the postal
Well, yeah, like there's
service.
nepotism in his upbringing.
Yeah,
he is
yeah.
only doing this because his dad is who he is.
Well, and it feels like a perfect
Yeah.
role for Jason Schwartzman in that way. Like, it kind of like he probably understands that character really well, because he probably has had it easy his whole life. His mum being Adrian from the Rocky films. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's that thing like, he probably does understand that fully, in the fact that, do you know what I mean? Like in that way. And I think that young girl who he speaks to, she provides this beautiful moment for Jesper to really like tell the audience like how he's feeling, and kind of give us a glimpse into like his soul, basically.
Yeah.
Nah, I don't want to bore you with it. Well, okay. It's just been bothering me, you know? If I don't get those letters, then what am I supposed to do? Stay in this little town forever, hanging out with an old woodsman surrounded by crazy people, and never wanting anything more? Back home, I've got pretty much everything. But here, I'm just another irrelevant, pointless nobody. But Klaus, he doesn't deserve I didn't mean to. Well, now I just feel like I've behaved like a... Precisely. Hey, you're a pretty good listener, you know? All right. You win. Let's go. Follow me.
Russ, what do you make of that moment when kind of like Jesper kind of realizes that he almost realizes he is the bad guy, right?
Yeah, he realizes what his scheme has done, which is to draw in this kind of grief-stricken um, carpenter out in the woods who has his own story, has his own life, and that yeah, it wasn't his intention to kind of, I guess, help this person through their grief, and he understands that if he leaves, it kind of undoes any of the work that he's inadvertently done. And it's useful for us as an audience to see that he kind of understands where he is, and he understands what is happening where he is, and that's useful for us to see. Again, Jason's out there giving us a fabulous performance. Um, yeah, I think it's all in that kind of moment, and then the follow on, and then it's also bookended this sequence by him being excited afterwards. They've delivered the toy that he gets to see the joy that it brings, and he is excited, and he again has that great Schwartzman energy that is so often with this character, that he's there excited and he's saying that how he's helped this child, how he's brought this gift to this child, and how wonderful it is to do this. Yeah, so I think it's both him showing that he understands that he's not been a good person, and then showing that he understands he's becoming a better person, and that's nice. It's nice to be able to watch someone see that they are becoming a better person.
Yeah, I can somewhat relate to the character of Jesper, and I don't know, maybe because it's Christmas, I've had a couple of drinks, and I feel like sharing things. But like when it came to like being a dad, well, I never really wanted to be a dad, like, to be honest. And like the way I became a dad is, well, it's not my place to say in regards. It's kind of a very like taught story, and there's another party involved, and there's a child who, unless the internet gets destroyed one day, can listen back to this and be like, "Whoa, my dad told that story on a podcast." But yeah, like as I don't know, like it's that weird thing, like as kind of Jesper kind of comes into this town and really like figures out his purpose, because like for a lot of my life, and I guess like even now, I still feel this thing of like purposelessness. Do you know what I mean? And it's like
Oh yeah, definitely.
having a kid is like, as kind of vain or kind of selfish that may be, or I don't know, it's given me an opportunity to have purpose and be selfless. Do you know what I mean? Like, because
Yeah.
I countless amounts of times it's like, well, I need to put him before me, like 100% of the time. And it's like, I think that's a kind of, and I'm just like, this isn't something I've even thought about before, like kind of saying this right now. That's a narrative that this film kind of has. Do you know what I mean? Like subconsciously underneath is that thing of like becoming a parent can kind of like Jesper kind of has this. I don't know. Yeah, what he has.
So I think having a kid, you gain responsibility in a way that no other action can do. Even getting married doesn't give you responsibility. What does give you responsibility is that there is a child in your life, and you kind of you could probably choose to ignore the child or to not be as active a parent as you want to be. But I found, and I suspect you did too, that it kind of pulls you into being a more active participant in their life, and you want to be responsible and caring. And yeah, it is infuriating and rewarding being a parent. And I'll my first was a surprise. It was a surprise. And I freaked the fuck out when it happened. But yeah, and like even during something like what we've been going through in the past 2 years, it kind of shapes your experience of it. So my experience of a pandemic is a lot of the time being about, well, how does it affect my kids? How is it affecting their lives? And yeah, it's I think this film captures in a good way what it is to become an adult. And I think to become an adult is when you have kids. I mean, there are other ways, like, you know, you get a mortgage or you start taking a fancy to collecting cheeses or whatever it is you want to collect.
Yeah,
You'll start wearing jumpers. You'll start listening to Jarvis Cocker or
yeah.
whoever it is.
I
But yeah, the act having a kid is hard and rewarding, and the act of Jasper being kind and nice and foregoing his plan to leave is a metaphor, because there are things you forego when you have kids. It's kind of changed what I expect I can do with myself, because I want to be there to look after my kids.
Well, yeah, I think this film like really cleverly, subtly does that, because by the end we find out that Jesper gives up the life of fineries and selfishness to settle down and have kids, and it's like this film is like, it is in its essence about about a man kind of like becoming a dad, really. And I think that's kind of what's really at the heart of this. Do you know what I mean? Because it's got that thing of the longingness of Klaus to want to be a father and never having it, and Jesper kind of not realizing what's right in front of him. Like he's kind of like, he's created this family, and then like not even like actual physical like kind of like, he's created this family around him. He's created this family like setup in Smearensburg, and it's like he has to make that decision, and like him deciding to stay is him deciding to be in that child's life. Like that's kind of like my reading of this film, is like he is kind of like, by bringing this joy to this town, he is like, I don't know, he's got someone up the duff, and it's like he's kind of presented with that moment with his dad. And like I think like this, I love the fact that the film is bookended with these kind of two conversations he has with his dad. And like I just play that the second one when his dad kind of comes back into town.
Dad, what are you doing here? Time isn't up yet. I've still got a few days until...
14,000 letters out of Smearensburg? Well, I had to come and see it for myself.
Dad, you can't just show up and... Wait, what? 14,000? That's not right.
But it is. Don't be so modest.
What are they doing here?
Well, they were the ones who alerted me to what you've accomplished here.
We couldn't let such a feat go unrewarded.
Listen, whatever they told you...
Well then, ready to go?
Go? Where?
Home, of course. A deal's a deal. The ordeal is over.
Home? With the personal butler and the breakfast in bed and my silk sheets?
No one deserves it more.
Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Klaus?
Oh, he was unbelievable. Encouraging children to write letters and go to school.
Convincing the locals to donate their labor to such a worthy cause.
Indeed. Well, shall we then?
I think that just hammers my point home, right? He's like, he has that opportunity, and it sounds horrible, like, and it is a very male problem. Like we like confronted with fatherhood, like it's statistically more men who kind of are presented with that choice of, do I stick around or do I get the fuck out of here? And that's almost like what Jesper is kind of presented with in that moment of like, and you see around him like Klaus and like the Sammy kind of like family who have like he's brought into his house, and it's that beautiful thing of like, I don't know, creating families. And it is that thing of, it doesn't matter if they're kind of blood related and stuff like that. And it's, I think that's one of the things that this film really does well, is show like, I don't know, like Klaus, and it's shown brilliantly as well when there's that kind of sculpture that Klaus has made that was him and his wife at the top, and all them holes for the children, and then like that is like shown to be like a thing of, it's the children that they give the presents to, it's this family he's invited into his home, it's Jesper, it's Alva, they're filling up those holes, because it's not about kind of blood ties of family that means anything to these characters. it is the kind of family that you surround yourself in, and it's kind of there's that's what I like about this film. It's a rich
Yeah.
tapestry of kind of threads, and kind of you can take different things away from it, even if some of them are half pissed, like analogies about becoming a father. I've just gone to, but yeah, I know I said maybe about half hour ago about wrapping up. Is there anything like we will talk about the kind of wrap up of this film, but is there anything else in the film that you wanted to discuss at all?
Or again, must reiterate, as that clip did, that Joan Cusack is really sensational in this film, and you kind of appreciate what a great voice actress she is. Rashida Jones is another great one who pops up in films fairly often in a supporting voice role. And while I might be frustrated that she ends up having to be a supportive wife figure in the end, she does at least have a lot of fun with that character up until that point. She at least is a really fun character. Really, they allow her to be spiky and a bit difficult to again. All the characters seem to start off being quite spiky and dislikable, and then kind of soften and become warmer as the kind of kindness seeps through the village, and that's, I think, a really great thing about this. But yeah, the finale is great fun.
I
The finale
love Norm Macdonald in this.
Yeah,
film.
Norm Macdonald, the sadly now past Norm Macdonald, is really great in this, and a really fun comedic character.
Yeah.
And also that he introduces the world of Schmierensberg to Jasper. He is the entry point, and yeah, he understands it.
Even he gets this heartbreaking moment.
Anchors away, Captain. We're sailing off at once.
Well, that's a first.
I beg your pardon?
Never saw a postman looking more miserable leaving than on the day they came in. Oh well, best leave it alone. I say, I'm sure it's nothing that could fester and eventually become a source of resentment and regret.
I feel like that performance could only be given by the late great Norm Macdonald.
Yeah,
like, the way he kind of pops in and out throughout the film, kind of like these snarky remarks and stuff like that, which I don't know. I always think like this film could have easily have been co-opted by like the Happy Madison camp or something. Do you know what I mean? In some weird
What a
way.
film that would have been.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like you meant, I don't know, Adam Sandler doing the voice of Jesper or something like that. Hey, we're gonna deliver some presents.
I mean, Adam Sandler did a Christmas animated film. I've never seen it, but
it's a Hanukkah.
done
It's a
fine.
Hanukkah animated film.
I must apologise.
Yeah, let's not start a feud between religions. So I think there's enough already, Russ. So yeah, the final act of this, I love that like chase, and the fact that you get that moment where the kind of rivaling children one of them saves the other, and it's it's that moment that Jesper like says to them that it is, well, yeah, he says this to the crumb and the what are they called? The
Ellingbows.
Yeah, he says this to them.
Yeah.
A true act of goodwill always sparks another.
I think you hit your head pretty hard, dear. You should lie back down.
You don't believe me? Turn around.
What?
Turn around.
Mine. Pumpkin!
Honey!
Drop that immediately!
Mine! Honey, what,
Echo,
sweetie?
come back here right now!
Down from there!
Pumpkin!
So I feel like we'd be remiss not to mention the amazing score in this film, which is by Alonso C. Aguilera, which is like, it's doing everything right. It's kind of got this it captures the thing of Christmas. It kind of at moments reminds me of like John Williams. It's kind of like it pushes all the right buttons and kind of like it does a lot of the kind of emotional heavy lifting like in certain points. And I don't know, like you mentioned about that needle drop making you cry. It's like I think he could have pulled something out of the bag on the score
Yeah,
that could have
yeah.
just as much kind of like really, don't know, gave that emotional punch to it as well.
No, and it's one of the. Like, I think everything in this film is coalescing together, and all the components are really good. The way it looks and feels and sounds, and is edited, and everything just kind of seems to click together. But yeah, the score is beautiful. It's again spiky when it needs to be spiky. It creates tension when it needs to create tension. Like when we first meet Klaus, a lot of the tension comes through score and through how that's playing into the scene. And the other thing I'll say about this kind of chase is the way this world is constructed is that the natural world is almost overwhelming this very small village. And so you get beautiful vistas, you get beautiful scenery around them. And this is like they're going through not a valley. Is it a valley?
It's like a big old hill, isn't it? It's like
They're going on a big old hill, there's a sled
down to
race.
a ravine. Yeah.
There's ravines, there's all this other stuff, and it's beautiful to look at, but it's also there's this feeling of danger. And the way the chase ends is that the humans have gone too far, and now the world is starting to overwhelm them a bit, and so they have to stop before they go over a ravine. And yeah, it's just this kind of little thing that's happening is that the natural world is basically close to consuming the world they're part of, and it's really interesting to watch that and to have that as part of the beauty of the world. Yeah, and I love this moment. I love the sort of romance that's just kind of happens there, and it's kind of unifying these two families. This idea that on the basic level, if you find love and kindness, it's going to solve your problems because the family's now going to have to work together.
Definitely.
And again, there's another play happening with the people. Like Jasper's been having his kind of scheme, and now it turns out that Klaus and the rest of them have a scheme, which is that they're going to trick the two families into destroying the gifts, but they're not actually gifts, they're just decoy gifts. And it's a decoy sled and all this other stuff, and it's great. It's a really great reveal that, in fact, this is all part of their plan. All part of their plan is that they'll have these toys destroyed, but they'll still be able to deliver it, so still be able to be part of the myth of Klaus, which is that even if the parents try and stop him, he's going to deliver the gifts.
Yeah. It's even if your spirit is crushed, your Christmas spirit is gone. You're still deserving of a gift from Klaus. Yeah, that's beautiful, and I love the way that this film kind of comes to a close with that kind of like Jesper kind of talking about the years that come after it, with the kind of like see those beautiful moments between him and Klaus, him kind of like knocking on his door, like one of the years he's got a mustache, and there's kind of like that exchange between them, and then there's that like absolutely, again, I'm not sure about you, but that kind of heartbreaking moment when Klaus kind of has that acceptance of death, and like that's the thing. This film tackles quite a lot of stuff, like in regards to the like emotional beats and kind of things that having a kid, you'll kind of have to be a bit like, I'm gonna have to have a chat with you about.
At what point do we include death in our story, guys? At what point does that become something we should talk about? And it's for a film about Christmas, there's very little supernatural in this film. It's all about explaining it in sort of like a real world.
Mm-hmm.
While there may be this element of the myth, it's actually this. So while the kids may see the sleigh and reindeer flying, what is this moment. But the stuff with the spirit of his wife and Klaus's final moments are supernatural, and the film is willing to keep it kind of mysterious in that sense, that it doesn't show him dying. He just sort of leaves.
Yeah, and he
just sort of goes.
It's got a kind of like Norse mythology thing to it. Like even the way like Klaus's axe looks, it looks very kind of like Norse, and do you know what I mean? It looks very like kind of it looks like it could be like Thor's axe or whatever or something like that. And it's got this and that moment of him kind of like those wind chimes, and then him just disappearing and Jesper saying like
Mm.
nobody could find where he'd went, nobody could find the body, nobody, and then the way it closes out and this, I just want to play like the final line of the film because I think it's a beautiful final line.
What I do know is that once a year, I get to see my friend.
And it is this thing that the legend then is alive, right? It's that the
Yeah.
real man is kind of gone beyond the mortal realm, and then the legend of Santa Claus is born, right? And it's beautiful. Like I've done it. Like I can't say enough. Like I absolutely love this film, and I don't know. Yeah, you can almost forgive Netflix for Red Notice if they've made this.
I mean, it's like with any studio will make red notices, but I appreciate, and yeah, this is a great film. This film is exceptional, and I think I was like, oh, this film's really good when I first saw it, and now I've watched it like 10 times. Maybe I'm a bit like, no, this film is really great, and I'm kind of like happy for Netflix to be big as an animation. I think they're doing exciting things, and I think they've got exciting things ahead. I mean, if you're giving me a new Henry Selick, I'm gonna think what you're doing is a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna think that you're doing great things, and if you're working with Cartoon Saloon, I'm gonna think you're great. And if you give a home, I think they've got a Leica coming out, and they recently had Aardman's Robin, which is wonderful. So yeah. This film is great, and it kind of leads to other greatness at Netflix. And if Netflix decide that animation is something they can do, and they have decided that animation is something they can do, and as animation sort of is kind of not in the cinema as much as it once was because of obvious, pandemic reasons, but also studios have decided that they're not going to show as much animation in cinemas. Hey, Netflix can give me 1,000 Klauses and I'd be happy.
Oh yeah. Bring it on. Like, and it's the like, I don't know. I love the fact that it's a one and done story. Like, do you know what I mean? There's no sequelization to this. It's like anything else, and it has this lovely, beautiful message. And I really look forward to seeing what the director and his kind of team do next as well, because I don't know, with this kind of like, I often think like the fact that he's got like fingers in the pies at Illumination. It's like, I'm so glad this wasn't an Illumination film, that he kind of got to hark back to classic Disney, kind of like years gone by, kind of got to do something new, and it is almost like, I don't know, it's that thing like what Sony did with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where it's like, oh, we're gonna push what animation can be. Do you know what I mean? And Klaus does it a lot more subtly than Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, because that kind of like literally like ripped up the rule book, kind of did things. Do you know what I mean? Like, when we're gonna do things that have never been done in animation. We're gonna like give you a film that has no right to be as good as it is. We're gonna literally have every other studio going, how the fuck did they make that? But like, yeah.
I mean, it's so good. I assume that that's what the new I haven't seen the new Spider-Man, but I assume it's going to be close to a spiritual remake of Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh,
you can get. I assume that's what it's going to end up being.
So
the Illumination point, I watch them. I watch them fairly often. I'm unlikely ever to properly cover them on my podcast, honestly, because I have nothing interesting to say about them. And they are the state of animation that is separate to the interesting stuff like Klaus, Wolfwalkers, Missing Link, any other animated studio. They're clean animations, they're sleek, shiny animations, but they're not, like, as you say, Klaus kind of, if it doesn't rewrite the rule book, is bending the rules of what animation is.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of its peers, some of the best examples of our time are there. That Illumination isn't that, but I respect them for being able to release films that are fine and make like $500-600 million, because It's what animation needs to
Yeah,
exist.
yeah, exactly. I think if Illumination didn't do what they did, we might not have a Klaus. Do you know what I mean? Well, obviously we wouldn't. We wouldn't.
Entirely.
Yeah. I'm sure if Sergio didn't have that kind of
experience.
And that tick next to his name of being the co-creator of Despicable Me, maybe studios wouldn't have taken him as seriously, being like, I'm going to do something that's classic Disney with this kind of new AI we've been working on to kind of create this kind of hybrid 2D, 3D animation that is beautiful. So I like to round off these episodes with a few questions, but before we get to them, I always like to ask my guests, could they find any Coppola connections within this film? Are there people who are in this film or worked on this film that appear elsewhere in the collective Coppola filmography?
The most immediate one is Rashida Jones. She was in Sofia Coppola's last film, wasn't she?
Yes, On the Rocks.
On the Rocks, yeah. So she popped up in that. Obviously, our Schwartzman is in many.
Yeah. He's the Coppola. We don't need to.
He's the Coppola connection.
Well,
in terms of other stuff, I mean, I'm not sure about Joan Cusack.
So
but yeah,
Joan Cusack is in Mr. Wrong, which John Schwartzman was the DOP on. Norm Macdonald is in Funny People, which Jason Schwartzman appears in as Seth Rogen's annoying roommate.
I quite like Funny People.
I love it. I love it. And a big shout out to one of my favorite podcasts, Truly Happily Madison, covering every film by the Happy Madison stable. I know that Jack Gregson over there is a massive fan of Funny People, and I've got to agree with him. On the point of Rashida Jones, she is not only in On the Rocks, she is in A Very Murray Christmas, which is also directed by Sofia Coppola, and she is in Between Two Ferns, the movie, and Neo Yokio, the I think another like Netflix animated series, or at least has been like released by them. And Jason Schwartzman is also in that show, and Will Sasso appears in Army of One alongside Nicolas Cage. So when it comes to scoring these films, we do it a bit differently to star ratings. I always ask my guests, what would be the perfect wine pairing for this film? Obviously, we've talked about the Coppola's loving a bit of the grape juice.
So I would say that it would be either a nice ice wine, because it's Klaus can only exist because it takes place in an icy climate, and that's how you create ice wine. Or it's a nice chocolate wine, because I like a good chocolate wine at Christmas. So it's either one of those two, maybe have one after the other. My wine sweet. So I'm a man who likes dessert wine. I like ice wine because ice wine is very sweet. The process of making ice wine makes it particularly sweet. And so I think there's a sweetness to this film that kind of fits that.
I think this is like there's a certain name for it. I should have looked it up beforehand, but there's like a German wine that's like a kind of very sweet, almost like syrupy wine. And I feel like this film is a bit of that. It's like kind of red wine, but like, because it's got that like bitterness of the town and the village, and it's kind of got this serious undertones to it, but also that sweetness of being an animated film and stuff like that. So,
and its message in the end is quite sweet. So
and I think it's got kind of like Germanic, or at least kind of Eastern European like roots in the kind of storytelling and stuff like that. So I think that brings it all together. So when you're buying this wine, aka this film, is it bottom shelf, middle shelf, or top shelf wine?
So I would say that this is a middle shelf wine. I think this is under £20, but you'd enjoy drinking it. And I say this because I think like top shelf is like a masterpiece, like a Godfather is a top shelf. Whereas this is like the higher end of the middle shelf. I would £20 is a lot of money for me to spend on wine, but I'd spend it on this. So while I love this film, while I think it's borderline a masterpiece, it's not quite The Godfather. It's not quite that level for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why for me it's sort of upper middle.
Perfect. That's a perfectly fair answer for that. So let's move on to some. I don't know. I like to think of them as almost impossible questions to answer. The first one of which being, which Coppola family member would you keep? But in doing so, you get rid of the filmographies of the entire rest of the family.
That's sort of a Thanos click of my finger and
Yeah.
they turn to dust. So is it that I get to keep their entire filmography, or that I get to keep just the bits that you're covering?
You get to keep their entire filmography. Yeah.
So I am torn between Jason's filmography, because it means I get to keep Wes Anderson's stuff, and even a Wes Anderson film that I don't love, I think should exist. Or it could be Spike Jonze, because I think his films are fascinating and represent their time so interestingly. It feels sacrilegious for it not to be Francis, because at his best he's remarkable, but at his not best he's Jack, and I could stand to not see Jack again. And I've never quite warmed to a Sofia Coppola film. I think she's really great as a director, but I just kind of have a distance to them.
I can understand that.
And if I can snap the Wicker Man remake out of existence, that would be something. But I do lose Pig, and Pig is one of the great films of the year. But it's probably going to be... No, it's Jason. I'm going to go with Jason. I'm going to stick with Jason. As much as I love Spike Jonze's stuff, it's going to be Jason's filmography is going to stay, because then I get to keep Scott Pilgrim and this film and
pretty much every Wes Anderson film.
And every Wes Anderson, and I get it, all of them.
Perfect.
And I get that one amazing Moonrise Kingdom shot, which is him talking in the foreground and kids on the trampoline behind him.
Yeah, and
one of my favorite shots.
Yeah, like I think Jason's a good shout, because you get a lot of other stuff as well. You obviously get his contribution to Phantom Planet. You get his contribution to TV, whether it's Bored to Death or Mozart in the Jungle. Like, I look at Jason Schwartzman and often think, like, he might be the most productive Coppola, like, in regards to how much screen time he's had. Like, yeah, Nick may have put out more films, but Nick has only put out films, where Jason has kind of like done web series. He's done like TV series. He's kind of like been here, there, and everywhere, and has got like a filmography, like just his kind of films that he's put out. He's kind of really chasing at Nick's heels in that regard, like of kind of.
And like, I think other Coppolas have had brighter moments in the sun, so like they've been Oscar winners or Oscar nominated, but I think Jason is fairly consistent, and he's been fairly consistent for decades now, that the stuff he chooses is good, and he's just part of a really good ensemble in most of them.
And I think his time is yet to come. Do you know what I mean? In regards to like, he could be a series. I reckon, like, you don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's got to be 40s. Like, even though he looks like he's in his 20s still. But like, you just imagine like a kind of, I don't know, like 50s, like Jason Schwartzman, or just kind of like that kind of thing of when he gets to a point when, I don't know, Wes Anderson's decided, I'm going to take a few years off, or like the kind of usual collaborators he works with decide to take some time off, and he's like,
yeah,
you know what, I'm going to try and do something that's not in my wheelhouse and do like a big dramatic role or something like that. Like, I don't know, Steve Carell in that wrestling movie he was in, Foxcatcher.
Foxcatcher.
Yeah.
He could do a Steve Carell. I quite like Steve Carell. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. That kind of...
like a bit more showy, a bit more.
Give me an
playing
award.
Against type.
Yeah. That kind of like, I've got a prosthetic on my nose. Give me an award, please. So, based on this film alone, are the Coppolas the greatest film family of all time?
Oh, based on this film, no. No. I'm trying to think of other families that are better. I think that this is a fantastic film. I think Jason is great in it, but I don't think that it's a fantastic film because he's in it.
Okay.
I think if he wasn't in it, I'd still love this film. I don't think this is an advert for the Coppola family. I think it's an advert for, the production company and for Netflix making animations. I think one of the more showy examples, one of the more a directorial effort from one of them is probably the one that would be the thing to say this is the greatest family of all time. Maybe not Godfather Part 3, even though it contains a lot of them. But yeah, I think it would have to be something directed by one of them.
Okay. All right, Russ, you're going on the naughty list for that answer, but it's okay. So let's get on to possibly the most important question of this podcast. You've obviously let us know that you don't quite gel with Sofia Coppola, but you did study Lost in Translation at university, so you may have an inside track to answering this question, which is, what does Bill Murray say to Scarlett Johansson at the end of Lost in Translation?
So my theory with this is that it was trying to become like the Before trilogy. So they're kind of like the same characters meeting up every couple of decades. So I think he says, let's meet here in 20 years. And so in 2 years' time, we're going to get Lost in Translation to Electric Boogaloo, or whatever they call it. I think it's him saying, let's meet here at a certain point in time.
Perfect.
And we're going to get a sequel.
I hope that the sequel's called like Speaking in Tongues or something, just because it's a reference to like one of my favorite Talking Heads album, and I imagine like Sophia would probably like think that's a cool like reference to make. And yeah, that sounds great. I would love that to be a thing, especially
I think it's that.
I don't think I would be worried though that if it's a 20-year gap, it wouldn't be a trilogy. It may just be a twofer, because I'm not sure if Bill Murray, God, I love him, but I'm not sure if he's got 20 years left in him.
No, probably
2 years
hasn't,
time.
because it was 20 years ago in like 2 years' time. So is he going to be around in 22 years? I don't know. Depends how much healthcare the Garfield money's got him. Like,
exactly.
If he's got like amazing healthcare, he'll be fine.
all that leisurely playing golf has really like put him zen, and his ticker is working a-okay. Not all the cocaine he did in the 80s when he was on SNL. and
that's good for you. No, 80s cocaine is healthy cocaine.
Yeah, it's before it was all cut with all this horrible pesticides and horrible stuff that they're giving to people these days. Well, on that kind of white Christmas note, where can people keep up to date with everything you're doing with the podcast, or you write as well, right? You write for Moving Pictures Film Club.
Moving Pictures Film Club. So I write for a couple of places. I write for where I work. I write for Moving Pictures Film Club, and I pop up occasionally on other websites. But you can find my podcast wherever you're listening to this. It's called Not Just for Kids. There's many fabulous episodes. I get on fabulous guests. I love all my guests who come on. You're coming on again.
Yep.
Next series to talk about. You're going to talk about a really great musical, which I've now watched, and I was like, this is a great film. Bonkers film, but great. So if you want to listen to me warble on about film some more, and I kind of picked Klaus because it's within my wheelhouse, then find me there. On Twitter, it's Adults2Pod, and it's also on Instagram. And my personal one is Russ Loves Movies, and it's mostly me fighting the urge to retweet funny things about Succession, because I don't want to spoil the finale for people who've not watched it. And occasionally there's some funny politics stuff retweeted. The Conservatives give you a lot of comedy gold whilst they're destroying this country. And I post any link to any podcasts I go on or any things I write.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Russ, for coming and making some Coppola connections with me.
No, thank you so much for having me. This has been really great fun. Oh, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas! Oh, wasn't that a lovely Christmas gift of an episode, guys? Russell is such a lovely person to chat to, and I hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as I had having that conversation. Hopefully, like most Christmases, I didn't get too drunk and make a fool of myself, but if I did, please don't hesitate to let me know. You can do so on all the socials, so that is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd at Caged In Pod. Or you can head on over and send me an email. You kind of feel concerned about me. You really want to have a quiet word in my ear. Feel free to do so, which is cagedinpod@gmail.com. So next week on the podcast, obviously we'll be full of food, hungover after Christmas, feeling all a bit grotty and horrible. So we're going to wallow in that grottiness and horribleness, and we're going to talk about 50 Shades Darker. That's right, baby. Charlie Vero Martin is back with me to dive deeper into the 50 Shades franchise. And does it get better? Does it get worse? Well, you'll have to listen next week to find out. I know in the lead up to Christmas, I've been doing this little shout outs to other podcasts you should be listening to, nice little wrapped up gifts of podcasts that you should be checking out. This week, seen as it is Christmas, I just thought I'd shout out a load of podcasts that I absolutely love, listen to week in, week out. So let's just go. Spotlight, love them. Liam and Matt have been on the podcast. Well, Paul's going to be on the podcast at some point. Is Paul Dano okay? Again, Matt, yes. Daryl, yes. Love everything they are doing. They get some of the best guests out there. Truly, happily, Madison. It is an absolute tour de force of podcasting, going to the weird and wonderful places of the films of Adam Sandler's production company, and oh boy, what a absolute joy. Ramblin' Amblin', obviously we had Andrew Godion on the other week, but yeah, check those guys out, because again, they're doing something that's amazing. Pizza Your Mind, two of my best friends making one of the best podcasts that's out there. The Damn Daniel podcast, a comedy podcast from comedian Danny McLaughlin, Rob Mulholland, and previous guest Molly McGuinness, is an absolute treat. And yeah, get involved with that one because it's dead funny. Like, apart from that, I'm trying to think of some of the small ones. Easy Riders Radio podcast, absolutely love Easy Riders Radio podcast. Again, a podcast so graciously had me on recently to talk about For the Dark World. Nobody else wanted to talk about it, so I went and talked about it, and it was tons of fun. Piecing It Together podcast, it's fantastic. Again, yeah, I'm now just talking about ones that I was on, but yeah, Piecing It Together. Obviously mentioned last week, W-Rated. Those guys are due a comeback in the new year. The Church of Tarantino, my good friend Scott from the You Can't Put Nick in a Cage podcast has come back with a brand new podcast. They stopped the Cage podcast. They started up a Movies to Watch Before You Die podcast, and watch this movie or die. And now, yeah, he can't. Not carrying on with that because Matt can't do it. Either way, yeah, the Church of Tarantino. It's going to be a fantastic podcast that launches next year. So yeah, I'm giving you hot scoops on podcasts that aren't even out yet, guys. Enough with me rambling on about podcasts I really enjoy and podcasts you should be listening to. So if you enjoy this podcast and would like to support it in any way, you can head on over to www.ko-fi.com/cagedinpod, where you can buy me a little digital cup of coffee, and yeah, that will really help keep the lights on over here at Caged In Towers. Or if you want a little bit more commitment with your money given to this podcast, you can head on over to patreon.com/cagedinpod, where you can sign up for as little as $3 or £2.50 and get access to a brand new podcast which is launching January, where 2 episodes a month you'll be able to hear the sister podcast of this podcast, or the somewhat stealth sequel podcast of this podcast, Movie Brat Bros, where I'll be talking to some amazing guests all about the films of Francis Ford Coppola's peers. And we're starting off with season 1 talking about Brian De Palma, and the first 2 episodes are recorded, they're in the bank, and they are ready to go, and they are on Phantom of the Paradise from 1974 with Daryl and Jeanette Bear. Daryl and Jeanette Bear, and it's a fantastic episode. And episode 2 will be on Mission Impossible with the fantastic, lovely Nathaniel Metcalf. That was another great chat. So yeah, head on over there. You get 2 extra podcasts for what, £2.50? So yeah, do it. Treat yourself. It's Christmas, guys. Treat yourself. You're hungover. Enjoy this. Enjoy everything. And if you would like to support this podcast and don't want to give me any money, you can head on over to Apple Podcasts, Acast, or wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. Even Spotify, I've noticed they've started doing rating and reviews. Leave a 5-star rating and a glowing review of this podcast. If you like one episode, if you liked all of them, it really does help this podcast grow in the charts and get more ears on it. I know every podcast tells you that, but it really does. And there's so many podcasts made by massive companies and massive names. So yeah, us small guys really need that help. We don't have any marketing budget. So I'll speak for myself there. I have no marketing budget, and even if I did, I wouldn't know where to spend it anyway, and what to do. And I like the fact that this is a kind of weird grassroots thing, and it's just a little tight club. So yeah, do all of that, and most importantly, guys, have a very Merry Christmas. I know this time of year can be a very lonely one for some people, and always remember that as much as I am the Coppola guy, the Nicolas Cage guy, I'm also a human being. So if you ever need anyone to talk to, as I said, that the email address, the social media is all there. If you're feeling lonely this Christmas, reach out to me. Let's have a chat. I'm here for you guys. I care about you guys because you care about this podcast, and I'll care about you anyway because you're human beings, and we're all here on this planet suffering or having joy together. So let's have joy or suffer together. Again, have a very Merry Christmas, and I'll catch you next week to wish you a very happy New Year. So as always, I've been your host, Petros Patsidis, your guide through the crazy world of the Coppola family. So remember to make sure you ring the battle bell when you want to go rooting and tooting and fighting, and I'll catch you next week.